Hello YouTube, my name is Zach, and today I'm going to be revisiting Bruce Dickinson as you all chose in the poll that I put out. Now, before we do that, I have some things that I've got to say. I think that me and you, Bruce Dickinson fan out there that saw my last video, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. So give me a moment to explain some things first. And the reason I'm doing this is that until I made that Bruce Dickinson video, I was all gung-ho about having a YouTube channel and making content. And then that video came out and I started getting people telling me to kill myself. I started getting people insulting me. I started getting people just calling me names and saying I don't deserve to have my job. Just, random stuff. Tons of negativity. Tons of people trying to argue, well, you can't sing like Bruce. Bruce can teach you how to sing, all that kind of thing. So maybe my first video did not convey what I was trying to convey. I'm going to start out right off the bat. Bruce Dickinson is a very good singer. Very good may be an understatement. He is a great singer. He is a legendary singer. And I respect and I understand that about the fan base, that you all see him as this metal and rock legend. He was doing things that other people weren't at the time. I totally understand that. So know that I see where the fan base is coming from. I know that you guys love him, and I know that you love what he's done. I know that he's moved you in your lives. I know that his music is powerful and it's impacted you. I understand that. Try to see things from my perspective as well. I'm a professional voice teacher. This is what I do for a living. These videos that you see are what I have people come into my voice studio and I do while they sing. I do the same thing. I do the same thing for myself. This is what I do for a living. It is my job to analyze singers in this capacity. Every singer on earth has flaws. They all do. I do. Pavarotti is probably the only singer that could get away with saying he didn't have any flaws at his peak. But before that, he had all sorts of issues with his voice. Every singer has technical issues, no matter what genre you're a part of and no matter where you come from. You're going to have some kind of technical issue. It's just the way we are. There are no perfect humans. My job is to help make those singers the best that they can possibly be within the confines of their own voices. And there are things that Bruce Dickinson can do at these various points during these videos to make his voice better. Now, I can't sit here and do some like chronological, year by year analysis of how he went through his entire career singing. I mean, that's just impractical. So I have to pick places that are from various points in his career. And I'm trying in this case to pick one that really does a good job of representing him when I feel like he is singing at his best. I did not know that Infinite Dreams before was during a bad performance or anything. I didn't know that. A lot of times I think people lose sight of the fact that when I find videos, I'm just looking for videos that give me things I can talk about and that I can teach through. I'm not looking at whether or not they were, in their prime. I'm not looking at things like, how far into the concert it was, how old they were. Occasionally that comes into play, but most of the time it doesn't. So the things I'm looking for are teachable moments. In other words, if in the rare chance that Bruce Dickinson came into my studio and wanted me to go through some things with him, I would stop these videos at these points and say, okay, well, maybe you should have tried it this way. This was really, really good. This was excellent. It could be even better if you did this. That kind of thing. That's how I teach my voice lessons. My goal here is not to be some cheaply made, quickly done, reaction video where I just sit here and, Bruce Dickinson, good, open sound, nice resonance, super supported. Like, I'm not going to do that because that is insulting your intelligence as a viewer. And I refuse to do that. I believe that you can appreciate singers more if you better understand what goes into the process of singing. So that's how I approach my content. Me giving critiques of singers is not an insult to them. It's what they do as well. Do you think that if Bruce Dickinson takes voice lessons, do you think that his voice teacher, if he has one, I know that people have said that he is and he isn't classically trained or trained. I don't know. I've heard conflicting accounts of it. But do you think that in the case that he does have a teacher, he goes up to that teacher and says, tell me how great I am for an hour? No, of course not. The teacher does the same thing I'm doing. They break down technical elements of their singing they can do to become more efficient singers. And that's what I'm doing here. So try to look at this from this angle. And I hope that my intentions are more clear now and you don't think that I'm just bashing the guy, because I'm not. The dude's a legend. Like, how he's done more with his career than I most definitely will ever do with mine. So I have no room to criticize him in that regard. And touring's hard. Maintaining your voice throughout concerts, tours, and seasons is extremely difficult no matter what the genre. So, there are things that are forgivable in these settings. So just know that I do think about those things when I make these critiques and analyses. I'm not just going through trying to bash people. Okay, with that out of the way, this is Revelations, and the reason I picked this is it was recommended to me by one of my students, Mark Aliana. He's a huge Dickinson fan, and I just said, hey, man, help me find something. I've been looking for Bruce Dickinson videos for hours, and I can't find anything that I feel was suitable. And he said, well, I think that this performance is a good indication of him when he's singing in just about his best form. I listened to it, and compared to everything else that I heard, I agree. I think this is excellent form of his, generally speaking, and so I'll be able to give some commentary on that. So, since most of you have already seen my content before, I'm not going to go into this about my little spiel about it being objective. Hopefully I made myself clear up to this point. Let's dive right in. And I don't think this is a copyrighted video, so I might be able to play more of it. But if I do have to chop this up, I know a lot of you complain about that. It's not my fault. I can't do anything about it. If you want me to have a channel, then let me chop the stuff up, because if I don't, I get copyright strikes. And if I get copyright strikes, not only do I get demonetized, which isn't the end of the world, but I could also have my channel completely removed if it happens enough. And I've put too much work into this channel to just, let a song play through for another 5 seconds. It's not worth that. I'd rather just chop it up and not let that happen. Anyway, all that aside, this is Revelations performed live in Sweden. Here we go. Before he even starts singing, I want to point this out. There is one thing that I have learned through making the last video about Bruce Dickinson and this one is that he's the consummate performer. The guy can rile up a crowd like nobody's business. He's energized on stage. He's covered in sweat. I pointed that out in the last one too. And a lot of the comments that I got in response was like, well, he's super busy. He's super active on stage. That's why he's covered in sweat. And I've seen enough of him now to know, yeah, he's crazy on stage. He's jumping up on platforms and on rafters and stuff. He's all over the place when he's on stage. So, I understand that he's exerting himself a lot. And a lot of times when you do that on stage, it can affect your singing and your technique. So there's an element of physical fitness that Bruce Dickinson has to be able to do that. And, that is only loosely tied in to singing technique. Physical health and vocal health don't necessarily correlate all the time. Your diet can have a big impact on your vocal health. But there have been people that have, terminal illnesses and things that sing just as well as they did before they got ill. So they're only loosely connected. Now, of course, if you have some sort of major throat problem, I think Bruce Dickinson had mouth cancer at some point. Now that absolutely can affect your ability to sing. But if you have some other illness or you're not in perfect physical shape in other parts of your body, it really doesn't matter. I'm a little overweight. So the thing is, though, that doesn't necessarily work against me as a singer. It actually helps put some heft on my sound. They say that your voice type can slightly change just by losing 10 or 15 pounds, just because of the way that the mechanism is built and the way the muscles work with different amounts of weight attached to them. So, there are some people that are bigger. Pavarotti was a big dude. Bryn Tervel was a big dude. There's a lot of professional, big name opera singers that are bigger people and that, they have this big heft on their voices. So there is an element of physical fitness that goes into the process of singing, but I think that vocal health as a whole is different from the physical health of the rest of the body. In Bruce Dickinson's case, he has to be very physically in shape to be able to keep up with the physical demands of his performance. I know that was a lot. I just want to clarify some of that stuff. Let's keep going. The biggest thing that I can see about his singing in this particular clip is that generally his intonation is very good. He doesn't really have any issues with sagging below the pitch like a lot of people do when they're singing this with that really wide open mouth, that wide embouchure thing, which he's doing. A lot of times that can lead to sagging of the pitch. So somehow he's found a way to manage that and keep the really wide open thing. And if you've seen my content for any extended amount of time, you know that I'm not a big fan of the wide embouchure thing just because you don't need to do it to make the sound. And the best explanation I've heard from a comment or anybody about why people do it is to just add some sort of facial expression when you sing. But I mean, if you think about it, I mean, these people like way back here in the crowd, like, I mean, do you really think that being able to see Bruce Dickinson's face is even a factor? I don't know. Sometimes wider embouchures allow certain sounds to be easier to create. So like if I go, if I make a sound of just an but then I go, if I make things brighter and wider, I can move up in pitch a little easier. It makes the easier to navigate in a higher pitch, but I have to compromise my voice at the same time to do that. So, you know, if like, for example, what I mean by that is that my larynx raises when I make things very bright and frontal, and I widen the embouchure, make things very open like that. So typically that's not the ideal way to sing in terms of strictly like vocal health perspectives. You want the larynx to be lower. You don't want to have that push, because the more space you have in your vocal tract, the easier it is on the voice to allow the sound to resonate, because the vocal tract is bigger and the sound is traveling through a larger area. One of the biggest comparisons I like to give is like the electric guitar versus acoustic guitar analogy. The acoustic guitar has the sound hole, and because it has a big sound hole, it doesn't need to be amplified. So you can think of it the same way. If your vocal tract is larger and bigger and more open, you're going to have more sound and it's going to be more resonant just by itself. If the vocal tract is smaller and more compressed and just like stiff, then what's going to happen is the sound is not going to be as strong, and you need things like amps and mics. And in metal, you know, they aren't trying to sing over, you know, the band. They have a microphone. So maybe these things don't apply in the same way. It's two different perspectives, but I want you to understand where I'm coming from when I make these arguments as well. His posture is excellent, and I think that I pointed that out in the last video. I think that kind of stuck out to me as well, how he has consistently excellent posture, very vertically aligned, like everything is lined up. And that's a key factor in singing, because if your posture is like slumped down, slumped over, this whole tube that connects the breathing to the throat gets kind of crimped up, and so the air doesn't flow as efficiently. So that's a big factor in his singing sound. You could hear at the end he had some vibrato on the end of the phrase, and in Infinite Dreams, I pointed out this like gospel jaw vibrato where he was going like thing, like doing like that. He didn't do that here. I think he does it at some point later in the song, but it's under different circumstances. He has shown in this video that he doesn't have to do that jaw motion thing to make his vibrato. So I just want to point out to all of you as well from that last video, it's not an all the time thing with him. It's only in specific cases. And when that comes up, I'll go into it a little bit more. But my general observation right here is that he has excellent posture, and that's actually making his sound a whole lot more consistent across the board. And I know that like if you're exercising a lot, or you're moving around a lot like he is, like you have a tendency, anybody has a tendency to like kind of want to bow over, you know, because you're tired catching your breath or whatever. So if anything, it's a testament to the peak physical condition that he's in, that he's able to maintain the posture while doing all this crazy movement on stage. So he's a brilliant performer, and I would never try to take that away from him in any way. I mean, he deserves all the credit in the world for that. So here, and I didn't mean to break in the middle of the phrase, but I wanted to point out that in the middle of this phrase that he's really doing a good job of keeping the embouchure smaller here, and he's singing in the same kind of range. It's interesting to me that the tessitura, or the average kind of how high the notes are, the range of his songs, usually sit in like a kind of, you know, similar place. I would not say that he has a massively wide range, and that he sits up higher generally. Like he's definitely a tenor, but he's got his embouchures more like closed, and everything's not quite so wide, you know, and he's handling and navigating this all very well. In some of the videos that I watched before, and I literally watched about 12 of them today before I decided upon this one, when things got really wide for him, things were flat. A lot of times his pitches were flat. So it's interesting that when he keeps the embouchures closed in phrases like this one, all the pitches are in tune. Like there's no intonation issues at all. Everything sounds very well supported and under control. But there's been some videos that I've watched of him where it literally just sounds like he's shouting, and the pitches are just all over the place. So I don't know if that is intentional. Maybe he's not concerned about the pitches in those specific places. And I actually elected against analyzing those videos because I knew that you guys would not receive that very well. And it's hard for me to make a clear observation as to whether or not that shouty sound that he does that's not quite on pitch is intentional, or if it's just him trying to project more. I'm not sure. But when he sings in this capacity with the closed embouchure, more, middle of the voice sound, not terribly loud, and just kind of sings into the microphone in the normal sort of speaking volume, it's wonderful. He's got a wonderful sound. It's has a lot of bite on it. Bite is kind of a term that we use in sort of the classical spheres to refer to a voice's ability to cut. It cuts a lot. Like it's got this piercing sort of quality. It's different from like a formant frequency, although people with bite tend to have a very easy time converting that into formant frequencies and things like opera. But the bite in this case gives it this very edgy, piercing sound that's very distinguishable. And so I would imagine that in a situation like when you're seeing them live, it would carry through the speakers extremely well. His voice would cut over the mix easily. So it's interesting to me that the embouchure choices that he makes have such a drastic impact on his sound. I mean, it's not out of the question. A lot of times when I have students that come in with too wide of embouchures, they typically have, intonation issues. And in this case, Bruce Dickinson has absolutely no intonation issues whatsoever. I don't know, very interesting, and it's something I have to ponder a bit. But I would say, if anything, that there's this is an argument toward keeping your mouth more closed when you sing, not widening out, because things aren't as easily controllable then. A lot of reasons for it. Don't want to dwell on it too much, but if you've seen my content before, you probably have heard me talk about it at length. Yeah, on that A vowel, sorry I stopped it quick, but on that pain, I'm not going to sing it in his octave because I'm not a tenor, but hey, when he sings that vowel, notice that he does have a little bit of an opening, but the lips don't go out super far. He doesn't do pain, like some people will do that kind of thing to where they spread way, way out. He didn't. He kept his lips kind of in a neutral position. Pain. Right around it, and it was resonant. It had vibrato that wasn't the jaw shaky thing. It was clean. It was on pitch. It was supported. I honestly think that any inconsistency that Bruce Dickinson has in his singing comes from opening his embouchures too much, and that's just come from me watching a whole lot more of it since the last time I saw him. Yeah, lips. So the lips embouchure, very closed, very small embouchure on that. He didn't go lip. You hear how even in my voice the vibrato isn't as even. Like, I'll show you a difference. Lips and lip. It just doesn't have the same ring to it. So again, closed embouchure, better tone. Makes perfect sense. The reason is that when you make embouchures fit the vowels better, you're actually aligning yourself to the shape that your vocal tract is making more. And it's a kind of complicated subject that would take a long time to explain. But if you try to match and allow your voice to sort of do what it wants to do on its own, you're going to find that you have an easier time. If your vocal tract is wanting to expand in a certain way to create the resonance for a specific vowel, or the mouth is trying to shape itself in a certain way for a specific vowel, if you run contrary to that with your lip shaping, the vowel is not going to come out the right way. It's like if I tried to say, the word moon with my lips wide open. You can't. You can't do it. You have to go moon, ooh, to make that come out. So singing is the same way. When you overdo the wideness in the vowels, it makes the entire process less efficient. So maybe that helps. Like I said, there's a lot more to it than that. Don't want to spend 30 minutes on that here. Very nice. I mean, there was a lot of glissando-y, slippy, slidey kind of stuff in there, but I would call that stylistic rather than him just not knowing how to sing. A lot of the vowels in there, you heard this sort of open, like rich, kind of thing going on. And of course, again, in his octave. I'm not going to sing in his octave because that would sound terrible. But what he's doing is he's actually allowing the vocal tract to expand, and he's allowing the sound to travel back in his mouth a little bit. So, and that's sort of something you have to kind of learn how it feels rather than being able to me to like physically show you how to do. But in oral demonstrations, this would be, for example, if I sung ah, okay, so I do the ah vowel, and then if I pull the ah back in my mouth, ah, you hear the difference. You got the ah, that's frontal, ah, and then the second time I'm letting the sound of the ah travel back more in my mouth. And it's a sensational sort of thing. You kind of just have to feel it as you sing. It's not something that I can specifically tell you how to do, but there's a definite difference. The first ah, I can feel it in my mouth. The second time I can feel it like way back here. So it sounds to me in these phrases on this particular part, he was doing a really good job of keeping that resonance placed further back. You don't always want to do that, but in the ways that he's singing here, when he's creating this very open sound, and he's doing a lot of that vibrato in the high end, you've got to keep that vocal tract open. You've got to keep the sound kind of pulled back a little bit. So he does a very nice job of that, and that's what creates that heavy vibrato, that thick vibrato sound that you're hearing, or that's part of it anyway. There's several variables that go into it, but that's part of it. Again, I'm not seeing the gospel jaw, the thing. I'm not seeing that at all. So it's a sign that his vibrato is incidental, natural, healthy. I know some of you don't like the word natural. There's not a really great word to explain it. But the idea is that when the vocal tract and when the folds align in a specific way, the vibrato just happens without you having to physically do anything. And he's demonstrating that he's able to do that here. Okay, he did it there a little bit. You saw the thing. You saw it a little bit there. That's the first example I saw of it. And we call that colloquially gospel jaw vibrato. There are several different forms of vibrato that are manufactured or forced or whatever you want to call it. And the jaw motion, you can do that one way. There's also like there's the deliberate air pulse vibrato where you go like that to make a vibrato like that. There's also the laryngeal vibrato where you go and you deliberately move the pitch back and forth. There's like 4 or 5 different ways that you can force a vibrato, and the jaw motion is one of them. But when you have a true vibrato, you don't see any of those things. So if I go, for example, you probably don't see or hear much of anything. I'm just allowing the folds to do what they do. I'm allowing my voice to just sit where it wants to sit. And what happens is during the adduct step of the vocal folds vibrating, there's like an oscillation that occurs across the folds. So when that happens, it creates this tiny little deviation in the pitch. It sounds like a waveform, and that's where vibrato comes from, or at least a natural or unforced vibrato. So another thing I want to point out here is that having the forced vibrato doesn't necessarily sound bad. So if you like the way that vibrato sounds, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with liking the way that it sounds. It's just important to know that it's not the natural vibrato that his voice would create. And a lot of the time, people forcing their vibrato is actually indicative of other unhealthy or bad vocal habits. I don't necessarily think it is in Bruce Dickinson's case. He may just have that gospel jaw thing trained so that he can have a vibrato even if his voice isn't in great shape. I mean, that's just a theory. I don't know. Because I don't hear anything about his singing that comes across as super unhealthy. When I listen to it, I don't think, oh, he's got terrible onsets. He's using rasp. He's, covering his sound too much air. Like, I don't hear that kind of stuff. So I would not call his singing unhealthy in any capacity. So if he is doing the gospel jaw thing, it's probably just to develop some kind of like go-to consistency of vibrato. It's not bad in terms of hurting your voice. It's just not the real thing. It's not the folds oscillating like they do when everything's configured the proper way to make it happen. So I understand that's a hot point of debate, and it's one of the biggest things people criticize me for in my last video. I just wanted to clarify a little bit. So hopefully that makes things a little clearer for you. Yeah, so that was excellent. Really well supported. I know I sound like a reaction coach, but extremely well supported. I feel like that phrase has become very cheapened, but the way that I'm specifically mean that it's well supported is that he was able to carry that consistency of his sound all the way through the line of singing without having to breathe in the middle. So when you have a line that's carried through that evenly without a breath in the middle, that's a sign of very good support. It was also very legato. There was a nice sense of connectedness all across the range, up up and down. The tone was even, and it didn't sound like he was machine gunning the notes out. It sounded like the notes and the words were all smoothly connected together, which is a sign of an excellent legato technique. Critical in singing as a whole. Legato is king when it comes to singing technique as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I mean, even here, after that big long break, he comes right back in and he just nails it in terms of having that openness. That's one of the biggest characteristics I'm seeing of this video compared to the Infinite Dreams video that I did. He has so much more openness in his sound, and you can tell because it has this sort of spinny kind of sound to it. Like if someone sings, you know, if I sing like that, you can hear that vibrato kind of ring or spin. But if I go, the vibrato is kind of there, but it's uneven and it doesn't really have that same spinny sound about it. Typically, that openness creates that spinning kind of sound, and that's just a sign of consistency. It's very interesting that this was, I think, from 2004 or 2005. It's like a more recent performance, and he's a good bit older than he was in the Infinite Dreams video, but he's done a remarkable job of keeping his voice in great shape throughout his career. And so, you know, I've heard some of the really recent stuff, but he's lost quite a bit in terms of his ability to keep this openness. Everything kind of sounds a little more pushed and strained these days, but in this time, I mean, he was really into like a vocal peak. I would say in like peak form. It sounds excellent. If any of you know anything about his training, like how he's trained his voice throughout his career, I'd love to know if you want to give me some insight. I'm very interested because he's one of the few metal singers that I feel like I've seen that has, you know, been able to look at 20, 25 years later and still have a relatively, you know, consistent and even sound better than he did when he was younger and sing this style. I'm very interested in knowing what you all have to say about that. So give me some insight into that. It's interesting. Now, that was a nice little artistic thing he did on at the end, and it's kind of subtle and it's kind of nuanced, but you have to listen to it in terms of context of the music. The guitars all kind of go, you know, they kind of dial it down. It goes a little bit softer part of the song. The drummer switches to the right. You know, everything kind of gets quieter. And on the eval at the end, instead of doing that, he doesn't do that big heavy thing. He kind of he puts a little more light affect, lyrical affect on it. What that does is it kind of allows the voice to follow the contour of the music, and that's a sign of some pretty good sensitivity with regards to the usage of his voice. So nice stuff. You don't see that a lot in rock and metal singers, so it's really good that he did that. Just a quick thing to point out. Yeah, even in that phrase right there, he did the same thing. It was very lyrical. And it's you, yeah, whatever it was. He didn't go, da 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 da. He didn't like, you know, make it super big. He took a lot off of the sound and made it more lyrical because the music is softer. Very good. I mean, that's a sign of a singer that has a little bit of nuance in his ability to sing and his ability to, you know, connect with the music. So really good. I mean, that, you know, generally speaking, I'm very impressed by this performance. Well, that's it. I mean, he's I will admit my error in my first video. I will say it. I picked a bad video. You know, I didn't know much about him, and, you know, it's okay. I mean, it happens, but I am much more impressed by what I see of him in this video than I was the last one, with regards to just his singing technique. He's shown a lot of competency throughout this performance that you just don't see in a lot of singers. The consistent openness of his vowels, the legato, the great support, the excellent posture, the ability to like keep everything together while he's flailing around like a madman on stage. I mean, that's really wonderful stuff. The sensitivity with the music. You know, his technical flaws are, you know, wide embouchures. You know, I don't understand the need for those. And, you know, I don't know if I ever will, because I have clear, tangible reasons to show why wide embouchures are disruptive to the mechanism rather than helpful. But other than that, I mean, I'm really impressed, and I feel like this video is a much better indication of why so many of you are such a huge fan of the guy. Like, I mean, I get it. He's a phenomenal singer, and there's absolutely no question that he is a top-tier talent in the realm of metal vocalists. So hopefully this, you know, gives you all some better insight as to, you know, maybe why I was harsher on him than you all expected in the past. And I still want to be fair, and I hope I was fair here, but, you know, that's kind of how I look at this, and maybe you all have a better understanding now of how I come to the observations and the conclusions that I do as well. So that's it. Next week, I have a very special surprise for all of you, and I'm not going to say what it is. Some people know what it is, but I'm not going to say it yet. I think that some of you are going to be very happy to see what comes out next week, and I'm excited to do it. And so be on the lookout for that. Check out next week's video. You're going to love it. I may try to make one more short video like I did this week, just maybe on like a quick singing topic or something like that. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, like, subscribe if you have not already. I can't believe this, but I'm starting to get close to approaching the 2,000 subscriber mark. Like, how is this even real? I can't believe this, but it's getting there. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit me up with any questions or comments. I give voice lessons. You know this. I put my booking down in the description in the comments. I also have a Patreon, and there are lots of things you can do with the Patreon, from joining my Discord server to doing voice lessons with me to getting to join a chat that I do once a month to getting to choose an analysis that I do. So, please check out my Patreon. For those of you who do support me, thank you so much. And I hope to see you all again soon. I hope you guys stick around for next week because it's going to be awesome. All right, take care. Thanks. Bye.